right, my friends, how we doing out there today? J.R. Dukes at your service. Just hit the go-go buttons. Everybody should be able to hear me right now. If you have any trouble with communication or hearing me, just type it in the chat and let me know. I want to correct my speakers. They're about to blow me out of my end right here. Okay, looks good so far. Hey, I want to wish everybody first, Merry Christmas Eve, right? The eve before Christmas Eve. All right, looks like everything's working. Hello to everyone on the X platform. Of course, you can reach me at the X platform at JR Dukes. All the other, it's at Reach JR Dukes. All the other platforms are simply at JR Dukes. Nice and easy. We've got a lot to talk about today. A few of the stories we're going to be hitting, the main stories, the main things I want to focus on today is number one, we all know that former representative in the House of Representatives, Matt Gaetz, who actually represents a district not far from me, right over here in Orlando. The so-called report on Matt Gaetz has been made public by the House committee that investigates ethics and these type of issues. We're going to actually take a look at the report. I actually have a copy of the report. I think it's about 42 pages. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all 42 pages. We're just going to hit the highlights of it. Additionally, President Biden issued a bunch of pardons today pertaining to every person that is on federal death row right now, with the exception of 2 or 3 individuals. We want to talk about that. We also going to talk about Luigi Maggiano from New York City fame. We're going to take a look at his trial quickly and the events that happened today. And then also we're going to, of course, talk about President Donald Trump elect, right? Woohoo! President Donald Trump elect. Exciting things about to happen and going on right now. Of course, he gave a recent speech to Turning Point. I think it's Turning Point America, Turning Point USA. We're going to take a look at his speech or some highlights from the speech. And one of the things I really want to talk about is the fact he is now talking about taking back the Panama Canal. Interesting history with that, and we're going to highlight that this evening. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Let me make sure everybody can hear me. We're supposed to have a special guest tonight, my friend Mark. I'm not sure if he is going to be able to appear by video. I know he was having some issues with some of his equipment earlier. At any rate, if you like to call in, you can do so with the link I just provided, or you can appear by video, or you can just simply do what most people do, and that is say hello in the chat. Let me check our messages real quick and see. Hey, there's my friend right now. Thank you, Sapphire, for being here. Julianne, it's good to have you here as always. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment and introduce yourself. Say hello. Let us know where you are from, especially if you're new to the channel. Of course, I want to extend a warm welcome to all my returning subscribers. Always a pleasure to have you here. If you're new to the channel, I am J.R. Dukes, your host. On this particular channel, I'm all about ending the dreaded disease of indoctrination. That's what I am all about. I think it's important that we understand the world we live in, because when you understand the world we live in, you can live your best life possible. I'd like to say we are the home of the free-minded patriots. All right, looks like everybody is in that has comments. Hello, FJB. Appreciate you being here. Crazy world we're living in. Washington State. Good to have you here as always, my friend. Thank you for being here. And of course, Zach with his 2 or 3 cats, I believe. Welcome to have you here, my friend. Hope everybody is where they want to be for Christmas. I don't know if some of y'all are still traveling, but let's say Julianne, she's all the way in Southern California, South San Diego. Good to have you here with us too, all the way on the other coast. Pretty cool. It's amazing, this technology we have nowadays, isn't it? I think it's pretty cool. We can set at a computer and we can talk to our friends all over the world now. It's amazing times, amazing technology, amazing blessings that we all have. And I, for one, don't take any of them for granted. Want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. And look who's in the house, my friend.
Hey.
Mark, before we get started, take your volume and turn it down if you can. I'll make sure we don't have any feedback. Let me mute his mic just so we don't get blown out, and we'll give it another test. All right, my friend, we'll try it again. Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
I can hear you fine.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine. I may have to mute you from time to time just to make sure we don't have any feedback. Good to see you. How's everything going with you and
good
with your with your channel. I know you've got a channel over at Sapphire Ridge News. I'm excited every time we go live. I might have been joined every time, but I like to listen afterwards if nothing else. So did you come prepared today? We're going to talk in depth about this Matt Gaetz report.
Dude, I have
Can you hear me all right?
218 subscribers now.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know your channel's growing. I think it's fantastic. So do you have a TV on in the background, Matt or Mark? Just take a second. I'm going to mute yours for just 1 second, and then we'll bring you back on right there. All right, everything's looking good. Yes, he needs to turn his TV off. You're right. Hello, Rosemary Fiera. Thank you for being here, as always. 10 degrees in Southwest Pennsylvania. That's one thing I love about living down here in the Florida area. we get cold down here, but nothing like it does up north, that's for sure. And when I was a kid, I was actually living in Chicago, Illinois, if y'all can believe that. When I was 10, 11 years old, we moved to Houston, Texas, and it's a different climate there for sure. I consider myself a Texan, but I grew up as a real small kid in the Chicago area, and I can assure you we have some serious cold winters right there. So let me double check. All right, we have Miss Clark, Alicia Clark. Thank you for being here out of New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. So we got both of the shores all covered. All righty, fantastic. I'll bring Mark back with us in just 1 second. Let's go ahead and take a look at this first video, and let's start talking about it. This, of course, is our friend Maggiano. He appeared in a court in New York City today.
That, of course, was murder suspect Luigi Mangione after a significant day in a New York City courtroom back in the city where he allegedly shot and killed the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, just 3 weeks ago. Mangione pleaded not guilty to the New York State charges, including terrorism, first-degree and second-degree murder. His attorney argued the state and federal prosecutors are playing political ping-pong with him, adding this.
I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial. Like every other defendant, he is entitled to a presumption of innocence. But unfortunately, the way this has been handled so far, his rights are being violated.
Meanwhile, dozens protested outside, holding signs with phrases such as "People over profit" and "Free Luigi." CNN Shimon Prokopez brings us to New York, where prosecutors have mountains of evidence.
They definitely have a lot of evidence on this kid. There's no doubt about that. Also, I want to take a quick second before we dive further into this. I want to show everybody this cup. I don't know if you can see this clearly or not. One side it says Best Dad. On the other side, J.R. Dukes. Love this cup. A couple of my daughters bought that for me for Christmas. So if y'all are watching right now, thank you. Your father appreciates that. Just had to throw that out there. At any rate, what do you say about Maggiano right here? This kid is in serious trouble. I'm glad to see that he has a good defense attorney. There's no question about that. And of course, you have the state piling on right now. Is probably the best way that I could describe it. Unfortunately for this kid is they have just too much evidence on him right now. They just way too much evidence. They have obviously the videotapes, the surveillance tapes. They have spent a lot of resources going after this kid, as they should. And although there are a lot of people, for whatever reason, that find him to be some type of hero, the problem that we're having is that, or the problem I should say he has, is that the evidence clearly is overwhelming. Now, of course, we have to still refer to him as a alleged suspect. He is considered innocent until proven guilty. And as a matter of fact, his attorney today went off in court about that very fact. She was not happy that Mayor Adams, even though he's facing current charges right now, was basically, well, first of all, she was mad that he was there, number one. She was also mad that he is not calling him an alleged individual that committed this crime. She's just saying straight up, or the mayor's saying straight up, that this kid did it. And, generally they just don't do that. Additionally, it violates court rules and actually precedent rules when you do something like this because of what they call it prejudices the jury. That's the problem that you run across with that. Matter of fact, let's listen for a second.
Like every other,
you can hear her complain about this, and then we're going to move on from this subject.
Concerned about my client's right to a fair trial. Like every other defendant, he is entitled to a presumption of innocence. But unfortunately, the way this has been handled so far, his rights are being violated.
Meanwhile, dozens protested outside, holding signs with phrases such as "people over profit" and "free Luigi." CNN's Shimon Prokopez brings us to New York, where prosecutors have mountains of evidence to sort through.
The crime of murder in the first degree and other related charges. How do you plead to this indictment, sir? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Accused killer Luigi Mangione back in court, this time for the charges he faces in New York State, wearing khakis and a maroon sweater, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The camera in court capturing the 26-year-old as he faces 11 state charges that include murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree as a crime of terrorism for the alleged killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian.
Yeah, I think Julianne's got this exactly right. He basically incriminated himself with that manifesto. He did a lot of planning in this particular case. I think that's very obvious to everybody that has been watching this case, but this kid made too many mistakes. At first, I would say that I was thinking, hey, this guy might be a professional. At least that was my initial thought on this matter. But after the days kept on going, it's clear that he had made way too many mistakes. A professional would not have done the things that he did. For example, stopping at the Starbucks or that coffee house before he ends up allegedly shooting this guy, I guess I should say. But just like Julian said, he's got this manifesto. There's video evidence. They've tracked this kid all the way to the day he came into New York City, basically to the day he left. They have definitely spent a lot of resources, and I don't think it's going to end well for him. American Nana, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you in the house too. Any comments on this, Mark, that you have pertaining to this case?
Yeah, you and I had talked about the terrorism charge. And so I looked into that today, and it's not terrorism like as we would think, like a terroristic kind of thing. It's that he walked down the street with the gun blazing pointed at the back of the guy and in broad daylight, basically, and shot this guy and terrorized a neighborhood. That's where they get the murder one terrorism charge from.
Gotcha. That makes I get that. What I'll say is that I still think that what they're going to find out is they're going to have a difficult time, at least on the federal level, with this case. I'm going to stand by what I've originally said about this, and of course, time will tell, and I'll do additional research into this particular case. My opinion is that when you generally think of terrorism, and from the part of the statute that I've read, I think the biggest complication they're going to have is in the manifesto. For example, he wrote something to the effect of that I thought about a bomb. I thought about putting a bomb there and just blowing the guy up. That way I'm not even there. But his own comments were that he was concerned about having innocents harmed, having innocent people killed. And you generally don't have that particular element when you have a terrorism charge. One of the factors they have to prove is that there's a harm to the general population or words to that effect. And again, I just think that is where they're going to have that particular issue on the federal level, but I think the state is going to go first anyways. And on, let's see what my buddy Zach says. Does he find court amusing? You know what? He may have been smiling in a clip or two that you were watching, but I saw a lot of the commentators today talking about the fact that he was not really engaging with anybody. He did not look at the crowd when he was having another perp walk. He did not look over to basically it was ladies over there that were smiling at him and making comments towards him. He paid them no attention. If you look at this clip on your screen that we just saw, I didn't see any smiling at that particular point. We'll see. I would think the longer he's in jail, the less he is going to be smiling. And remember, as we talked about on this channel, I think he's got a lot of issues. I personally think this kid has suffered from some type of form or some issue relating to schizophrenia, and somebody with that condition is not going to react the same way we would normally think somebody would react. American Nana says he shot him in the leg, So he turned to see him. While the victim turned to run, he was shot in the back, from what I heard. That's an interesting take on that. What I will say, American Anna, is, again, I don't know, but one of the comments that I have been listening to is that somebody that is not a very well-trained shooter, and especially when someone's nervous and they're holding a firearm like this, if they're nervous, if they're not being trained, and when they fire the firearm, it's going to kick. And if you're not used to that kick, generally what happens is you end up hitting in front of you low left, or in his leg the way that he got hit. But that's just what I heard. Your comment could be perfectly valid. I just don't know, but that's an interesting point. Thank you for sharing that with us. Julian says his lawyer had just blasted the court over something. He smiled. Okay. I have no doubt this kid's got a lot of issues right here, suffers from the same medical condition other shooters had, unable. Okay. Yeah. Oh, well, we've talked about that he probably had some performance type issues, which probably added to it. There he's smiling right there in the back of that car right there. We've talked about this, that in that particular region of the back, remember he had that x-ray on his main X account, which we have attributed to being his x-rays. And indeed, when you have damage in that particular area, you can indeed have issues, performance issues. What say you, Mark?
Yep, I agree.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next story that I have for us today. We are going to take a quick peek. I have this one video pulled up, but you'll have to bear with me 1 second. I have to switch it over. Okay, let's go ahead and take a peek on this Panama Canal. Y'all may or may not be familiar with President Trump's comments. I have a video on this coming up, but I want to take a look at this particular clip that I found on Fox News. I believe when we get to the actual feed, I have the comments that President Trump gave pertaining to the Panama Canal and his insistence that it is taken back. And remember, for y'all that may not know, that are younger out there, the Panama Canal, of course, is a canal that connects the Pacific Ocean with the Gulf of Mexico. And it was built with the labor, the funding, the money of the United States. And for whatever reason, then President Carter, back in the 1970s, kind of gave the canal back. Now, as President Trump pointed out, there were restrictions and conditions on this canal, but I think the problem that we're having right now is the fact that this canal is being kind of taken over. I don't know if that's the right way to say it or not, but it's heavily being influenced by China. And the United States is not going to allow that to happen. First of all, Panama is charging us an arm and a leg to use the canal, even though we built it. And I believe 30-some thousand Americans died building this particular canal. And it is definitely contrary to our military advantage not to have that particular canal under our control. We have to have a way to get our ships back and forth from one ocean to the other ocean. I mean, it's really just that simple. And we'll have to see exactly how that works out as far as in law or whatnot, if they're able to be successful in doing that. But let's listen to this short clip, and then we're going to talk about it.
O'Leary Ventures chairman, Shark Tank investor Kevin O'Leary. Kevin, don't you love this? I mean, he does start with these totally wild ideas, although when you really think about them, I mean, the Panama Canal Treaty, I remember when it was debated, Ronald Reagan debated with Bill Buckley about it and so forth. It is a contract, and it is a contract that has been broken literally thousands of times by the government of Panama, and China wants to get its greedy hands on it. What do you think the possibility is of Donald Trump coming in and say, hey, look, you guys broke your contract, it's ours?
Well, I think we know it's 100% probability that's going to happen, but Trump is a transactional guy. He's a negotiator. I think everybody understands that now, there's no doubt. And he picks his fights one at a time. Last week it was Canada, now it's Panama, and wow, we got Greenland on this list too. So, I mean, look, it's a very interesting way to start governing before you're actually the president. You do it by social media, you wake everybody up, they come flying to Mar-a-Lago. It makes sense to me. I don't see any reason why you can't do it. But the China thing in Panama is an issue, because if that was in any way affected, and we didn't get access. That's a money saver for shipping in a very big way. So my guess is that envoy goes down there sometime in February. And
Well, I want to add some additional information or context to this. It's not just a money thing. It is antithetical to our national security, point blank. There's no way that we could allow that canal to fall in the hands of an adversary, especially an adversary like China. So we'll have to see exactly how that transpires. Mark, you had any comments on that?
Yeah. They're charging us up to $500,000 per ship. The more cargo the ship has on, the more they charge us, and the highest rate we pay is $500,000 each ship.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
a ton of money. All right, let me check out the comments real quick. We had a couple of comments on here. American Nana on the gun. The gun usually kicks up. I'd have to go back and double check. You're talking about when he shot that Brian Thompson, and he ended up the first shot that he shot, it hit him in the leg. And yeah, I'll have to go back and double check. I just listened to a so-called expert that was talking about why someone would end up getting shot in the leg like that, when they're focusing the gun directly at him like this. And he was explaining pretty well what I just said, that it has something to do with inexperience. And generally somebody that has that type of inexperience is going to end up shooting low into the left or as low to the right, whichever way it was. That was a predictable response, but I'll try to check on that and get back to you with that. Cause you're right. You would think if it kicks up, he's going to shoot him higher, but it doesn't, I just don't have all the information on it. I just know the inexperience from what I heard is the reason why he would have been hit in that lower leg. So we'll get back to you on that. Thank you, American Nana. And we have a new friend, Mr. Oliver. Thank you for being here. He has a pointed comment, which of course is always welcome on our channel here. He's pretty resolute in saying there are absolutely no provisions in that treaty. The treaty included 100 years, and that was signed by President Jimmy Carter. End of story. Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see, Michael, if that happens or not. I am not one that normally would say that right or that might makes right, but it is what it is. There's no way on God's green earth, the United States of America, that has a strong leader, a strong president. And of course, I think that describes President Donald Trump elect to a T, that is going to allow an adversary. I mean, listen, if there is a war in the next 10 years, the top of that list in my mind is going to be China and the United States. I think that's very clear that the war that's going to happen, if it happens between, over the Taiwan issue, basically what you have is you have a civil war in China that never ended. That's exactly what happened. You had one camp that stayed on the mainland. You had the other camp that went over to Taiwan. I think that was Clai Sang Chang, whatever their names were. You basically imagine this in the United States. Imagine if at the conclusion of the Civil War, you had the South fleed and went to Jamaica or something along them lines. And that's kind of where they just held up. And that's kind of what happened in this particular Taiwan situation. That's what makes this so dangerous. It's been festering for a very long time. And the president of China has made it very clear that he intends on bringing resolution to this issue one way or the other. Another thing that makes this even more dangerous or more of a current alarm is the fact that China, like most of the world, but definitely in China, they have a serious population crisis on hand. And this is a direct result of this outrageous one China or one baby policy they've had in China for a very long time. If you think about it, you do the math, and two people can only have one child, and then that one child with a partner can only have one child. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the population is going to decrease substantially. And China is supposed to go from something like 4 billion people now to a population, now get this, a population that is less than what the United States has. Approximately 325 million people is the population that's projected for China in the next 50 years. That is one heck of a decrease in population. And I mean, it is what it is. It makes it more likely that China's going to have to do something now than later, because they simply are not going to have the people to go into Taiwan and try to take Taiwan by force. So it's a very dangerous, it's a situation that frankly has just a lot of pitfalls and a lot of ways where things could be misjudged, and boom, you're into a war. Now, continue on with that. The Panama Canal is definitely in the strategic interest of the United States of America. And I cannot imagine President Trump is going to allow that to fall into the hands of China. Mark, you got any comment on that?
I agree. He's not going to let it happen.
What do you think he'll end up doing? You think he will actually take it by force, or do you think he's going to find a provision in the contract that essentially says you're in material breach of the contract and then make something
Yeah,
happen?
all he has to do is find a reason in the contract to provide that they breached the contract, which they have several times already.
Yeah, I
Just
agree
haven't-
too. And
lately that would enforce it.
I agree. Let me check the comments real quick and we'll move on with this right here. Let's see. Julianne says Big Lots Party City are closing. Yeah, we'll see less Chinese cheap imports, but there's a lot of business we do with China. And, that is a question that's on my mind with all the problems we are having with China and all the threats. They are actively working very hard to increase their nuclear capacity, something like from the 300 or 400 nukes they have now. They're trying to increase that by the thousands. They want to rival the arsenal of the United States and Russia, for that matter. Very dangerous situation. It's not my intention to try to scare anybody on Christmas Eve, but I'm just telling you, this is a problem. And thank God that President Donald Trump elect is coming into office. I would hate to think what would happen over the next 4 years with a President Kamala Harris or even a President Joe Biden. Extremely scary, extremely dangerous. And I encourage us, each and every one, in our personal prayers, that we pray for the leaders of our country. I don't care what your party party affiliation is. We need to definitely pray that our leaders receive God's wisdom to make sure they make the right choices for all that we are about to have to deal with. Julian says, I wish you could watch Ashton Forbes. China knows what tech yeah, I'm sure. And that Chinese policy is a complete screw up. Yes, it is. Zach, but one didn't always mean one. It might not have, but I've heard horror stories that if you had more than one child, you had some serious problems, including but not limited to imprisonment, this type of thing. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, I'm certain one way or the other, they're going to decide that they want to play nice. It's just like anything else with Donald Trump. He knows how to effectively use power. We've had presidents before that, frankly, they have no spine. As Senator John Kerry said not too long ago, they need to get on Amazon. They need to buy a spine so they have one, and they need to do what they need to do, and they need to use the power and might of the United States accordingly. It's very important that we stay strong and we stay dominant in the world. The world is as healthy as the United States is. It's really just that scary. I'm not scared when China knows we have wormhole capability. Well, that could be very, very well the case. I don't know. Zach, well, if you're really scared me. Nah, I don't want to scare you. That's not, yeah, they were all trying to have boys. You're exactly right. Now, that's another problem they have in China, is they got too many men there because the families there and that culture, it's very important they pass on the last name. And of course, most brides take the name of the man, and that's another problem. They got a lot of men there and a lot fewer women, and you can imagine exactly what the problems would be in that particular situation. So let's go ahead and move on to the meat of what we got here with Matt Gaetz. I want to make sure we allot time for this. Sapphire, any comment, anything we've been talking about? Are you ready for Gaetz?
Yeah. I have a unique perspective on China. My mom's cousin was a missionary to China, and she said there is no such thing as a private business in China. The government owns everything. And she said, you can be walking down the street and say one wrong word, and they show up at midnight and take you away, and you're never seen again.
Yes, it's very scary the way they function there in China. It's very It's very controlled. The entire society is controlled. Everything is watched by video camera. They give each citizen some kind of like a patriotic score. I'm not making this up. That's what they do. And for example, you can buy the book that President Xi wrote. If you buy his book, your score goes up. And this score, think of it like a credit score. If you have bad credit, you're going to have a hard time getting into business, getting financing, getting a home, this type of thing. Same thing in China. They use this score, this patriotic score, if you will. They have a specific name for it, but that's basically what it is. And they watch anything and everything that you do in your life. It's scary. Some of the laws, some of the policies the Communist Chinese Party has, like Mark was just referencing and talking about. I would add to it that, for example, TikTok, the Supreme Court is going to hear the case of TikTok. You probably recall that the Congress, along with President Biden, passed a law that said basically TikTok has to become owned by an American because they are worried about the security threat that in their mind TikTok is, because they are owned by the Chinese government. It's really just that simple. They have went through the court so far and they have lost. Now their last hope is with the U.S. Supreme Court. And as Mark was just pointing out, one of the most ironic things in my mind is the fact that you can't do that in China. China will not allow X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, even True Social, to operate in China. Those platforms are banned. They have their own approved platforms that you can use. In China, you could not go to their courts and appeal like they are appealing here and going all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's just really odd that we allow this as a nation, but it's the way we're set up, and I'm confident that a conservative Supreme Court is going to uphold this and make TikTok either divest the ownership in their company, or it's going to have to close. It's going to be a slow death, but they will indeed close it, and I'm sure Apple will do whatever has to be done to finish strangling the company if that's exactly what it takes. And yes, they do have some great channels on YouTube. China Insider, I think I watched that one too. They have another one that's an Indian-based company. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's well, if I think about it, I'll let you know. It'll pop in my brain here in a second. But they trying to think of it. I can't remember it. There's 2 or 3 news sources overseas that I really like. It allows me to have a different perspective on what's going on in the world, that and it may not necessarily have what I call an American filter on it. So it's interesting like that. Yes, and China is all about trying to get into our semiconductors and our chips. That's one of the reasons they want Taiwan so bad. Most of the chips used in everything nowadays is made in Taiwan. I could only hope the United States has made plans to effectively have a system set up where those chips could be made here in America should there be a problem with Taiwan. Because, ladies and gentlemen, everything we do nowadays, talking right now on these computers, they're all made with chips produced in Taiwan. They just have a very unique capacity to build those chips, have that infrastructure, and it's kind of scary to behold, but that's what it is. One good thing the Biden administration did do that I can go ahead and mention is they did pass, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was some type of CHIP Act. And basically it really created tax incentives, and it made it clear the nation of our policy was to start producing more here in the United States. And it mucked up the system, is the best way to say it, to where China could not have access to the same technology. So I ask you, Mark, any comment on that right there?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the founder of Alibaba. His name is Jack Ma. He said one word against the finance minister, and he disappeared for 6 months. And when they found him, he was teaching a kindergarten class and said that he had seen the light.
I think if this is not handled correctly, I think we're all going to be seeing the light sooner than what I would hope, So, all right, let's stand by. Let's get ahead, and we're going to get into the main story today, of course, which is this report pertaining to former Congressman Matt Gaetz. So let's listen to this quick clip, and then we'll start start chopping through the actual report. I actually have the actual report and the text of the report, and we're going to review some of it together live in just a minute.
Just moments ago, the House Ethics Committee has released the ethics report on former Representative Matt Gaetz. This is a result of a years-long investigation into the Florida Republican, allegations that he slept with a minor and used illicit drugs, both of which he denies. The committee says they have found substantial evidence of multiple illicit acts. Let's go back to Tom Dempsey for the latest out of Washington. So apparently his last-ditch effort, this filing the lawsuit, did nothing to stop the report from coming out.
No, it did not, Marty. Good morning. Look, this report coming down just minutes ago, and it's pretty damning against former Congressman Matt Gaetz. The committee noting that this investigation involved obtaining 14,000 documents as part of this investigation, as well as around 24 witness interviews. And to get to this, some of the big findings of all this, in sum, the committee says it found substantial evidence of the following. From at least 2017 to 2020, Representative Gaetz regularly paid women for engaging in sexual activity with him. Also, in 2017, Representative Gaetz engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl. That's not it, though. During the period from 2017 to 2019, Representative Gaetz used or possessed illegal drugs, including cocaine and ecstasy, on multiple occasions. The committee also goes on to say that Representative Gaetz knowingly and willfully sought to impede and obstruct the committee's investigation of his conduct. Like I said, some very damning allegations, and the committee, the House Ethics Committee, saying that it found substantial evidence of those accusations. So again, this is a very big case we are following today. This investigative report coming down just minutes ago. This investigation dates back to 2021, but a very big part of this is that this investigation faced even more attention because President-elect Donald Trump earlier this year nominated former Representative Matt Gaetz to be the next Attorney General. Of course, he pulled out of that nomination process as a result of this. All the attention that was on this investigative report. And we saw a lot of the chatter over this investigative report, but this is coming down just minutes ago. And again, some other notable parts of all this, the committee saying it received evidence confirming that Representative Gaetz at times personally made payments to women who attended parties with him. And the committee goes on to write that the record also indicates that Mr. Greenberg, who's described as an associate of the former congressman, sometimes paid women for having sex with Representative Gaetz and was sometimes reimbursed by Representative Gaetz. So some very big allegations.
Well, I want to give some opinion about this myself. And then, Mark, I'm going to ask you for some comment on this. And I probably am going to surprise, if not shock, some of you on my opinions of this. Politically, I would say that my views are somewhat libertarian. I'm definitely not what I would call liberal. There are some views maybe that would be considered that way. And I would say I'm probably a pretty conservative guy. So I would say I'm something like let's just say a libertarian conservative. I don't know. Is there such a thing as that? That would probably best describe me. And what I'm about to say, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't want anybody to say that I've condoned anything to do with criminality. If it's a crime, you shouldn't do it, period. At the same time, I live in the real world, just like each one of you do. And I'm very uncomfortable about a report like this that talks about the fact, I don't know how old Matt Gaetz is, 30, early 30s, I don't know. We can look it up. And this is from 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. I'm just very uncomfortable about these crimes involving sex. And I'm not talking about we'll just call it grape for the YouTube censors here. That's not what I'm talking about. In this case here, it has to do with statutory type, which basically means she was underage. She was 17. I, for one, am just very concerned about these type of crimes and people going to prison for very long periods of time for something like this. It just makes me uncomfortable. And I'll tell you something else that makes me uncomfortable is the fact that we're putting out for the entire world to see the independent investigation of someone that's no longer in Congress. And remember this, I have not always been a Matt Gaetz fan. I was not happy with what he did to Speaker Kevin McCarthy. I was not happy about that at all. And I said as much on this channel back when that was going on. Having said that, listen, if each and every one of us could have our entire lives examined to see what we have paid a woman or what we have done in our personal lives, there would be something there salacious for each and every one of us. If they went back and they were checking into sex partners or sexual things or whatever, it's extremely intrusive. In my opinion, it's inappropriate. It's no one's business. Now, this allegation of 17-year-old, that's a little more complicated because obviously we have statutory laws for a reason. But at the same time, I don't know if anybody agrees with me on this. I have trouble when something like that happens and this same person that is the alleged victim is, the very next day they're out doing something that, I want to be careful. I'll choose my words here. I've just seen some crazy stuff. I mean, there are 17-year-olds and then there are 17-year-olds that act like they're 38. And they have daily behaviors like they're 38. And then what if he didn't know that she was underage? I mean, that's part of the allegation too, that he did not know. I realize the law does not make a distinction like that, but just because the law doesn't make a distinction doesn't mean my mind doesn't make a distinction. I mean, I just think it's nuance. It's nuance in the sense that we have to know all the facts and hear from both sides. And again, this sexual nonsense makes me very uncomfortable. If we could only have leaders that had no sexual issue, we'll just call it that, in their past, we would probably have very few individuals that could serve in office. We know for a fact President Donald Trump elect could never serve as president. We just know that for a fact with all the nonsense that's been going on with him. Again, that's just my opinion. It may be a minority opinion, but it's my opinion just the same. Sapphire, you got any comment on that?
Yes. I never liked Matt Gaetz. When I lived in Perry, Florida, Matt Gaetz's district is up near Tallahassee. So I was
I
quite...
thought Matt Gaetz was over here in Orlando. He's up
by Tallahassee.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
And when I lived in Florida 5 years ago, this was a well-known subject that he was known to date underage girls, provide them with drugs, provide them with money if they needed money. It was a well-known topic up by Perry, Florida. And so I never liked him because of that, because he's emblematic of the corruption in Washington, D.C. These parties go on all the time.
Let me ask you this, Mark. Does it make you uncomfortable when you hear these conversations involving whether someone used drugs 10 years ago? Obviously, this guy was much younger then, and he's with a girl, and they're using drugs. Does that make you uncomfortable? Is that fair game?
I wouldn't say it's fair game, but see, this started out as a DOJ investigation, and the DOJ fed the results of their investigation to the House Ethics Committee. Ultimately, they decided not to press charges because they said that statute of limitations had run, but that there was ample evidence to provide these facts.
It's just right or wrong, and I realize this conversation is a delicate conversation. I have seen or heard of stories like this where a guy is charged. The guy, let's say he's 23, she's 17. This guy ends up charged. He didn't know she was 17, and then the very next day she's out with her boyfriend. You know what I'm saying? That maybe is 20 or 19. You know, some of these states have these Romeo and Juliet laws. I'm just very uncomfortable with all this. And even with the drug usage, you're going to tell me in America that drug usage is not prevalent? Now, for one, I have not been one to mess with drugs per se. When I was a kid, I'm sure I tried smoking something with a girl that maybe I shouldn't have done, but I did, and I don't have any regrets about it. But it's just never been something for me. If I'm being perfectly blunt about it, I would say that I'm glad I never got into that scene because I probably would enjoy it too much. And then it would mess up my whole life. But my point is, I'm a person that advocates people can make their own choices. We don't need the government telling us anything. And my other point is, all of us have these type of things in our past or in our history, if not currently. And it makes me very uncomfortable. I think it's extremely unfair, and it's not the right ground for them to be drilling on him for these allegations from this long ago. And I mean, the only thing I can see that is criminal would be the 17-year-old. I guess you could argue about the drug use, but again, that's prevalent all over America. I don't know. I'll defer to you.
My issue isn't that he did drugs or that she did drugs. It's that the reports are that he provided her with drugs.
Well, let me ask it this way to you. Hang on, let me mute your mic as I'm talking here. Okay, we're good now. Let me ask it this way to you, Mark. Do you think it is? I would just say it's par for the course that a boyfriend or someone ends up getting some marijuana, getting some type of party drug, and he gets together with his girlfriend. So what? What do you say?
Yeah, but when the girl is underage, that's where the issue comes up. 10 years ago, he would have been 25 and she was 17. And that
so he's 35. He's 35 now.
Yeah, he's like 35 now, 35 or 36.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he probably is that old. Well, listen, that does make it a problem, I guess. But at worst case scenario, you have if true, you have a 24, 25-year-old guy that had some girl he's with that is 17 years of age, and he supplied her with some pot or some type of drug. I just think in the scheme of things, in my mind, that doesn't rise to the level of disqualifying behavior. I'll give you the final word on it before I start looking at this document.
The whole thing is that, see, when he was nominated for Attorney General, he must have known some of this stuff was true because he immediately resigned his seat from Congress. He's not required to do that until after the nomination is approved.
Well, I think that is, I think that's a fair comment, and that's the reason why so many people are paying attention. And we're going to take a look at this report together. Let me check the comments real quick, just make sure I haven't forgotten any questions. American Anna says she was 17. Beatles said I was 17, never got carded. Yeah, American Anna, that's exactly what I'm saying. It just, in my mind, it's just a whole lot of a nothing burger. But that's just my opinion, and this is one of these subjects that a reasonable person can differ with me on and disagree with me on. Me, it's not a problem. What I want to know of is, did this guy commit treason? Is this guy working with a foreign adversary to sell United States secrets? I mean, these are the things that are on my mind. Julianne says, thereby the record mechanism, I knew he must have been around. Oh, okay. You're talking about the record or something. I got you. Okay, good enough. Julianne, fake ID can be printed today. Yeah. Yeah. But just understand that under the law, even if someone produces this is how nutty some of these laws are. You can have a girl that's 17. She looks very mature, very much older. She can have a fake ID. And according to the law, the way the laws are written, if she gets together with a man, and they have relations together, the man is guilty of a crime, even though she provided a fake ID. That's the way the statutes are written, if you can believe that. Personally, I have a problem with that, but again, that's just my opinion, and reasonable people can differ on that particular subject. So listen, without further ado, I want to go ahead and take a look at this document real quick. I don't want to run too far over our power hour because it is Christmas Eve, and I have a girlfriend that I promised to be done at a certain time. So we're going to look through this and hopefully finish this up pretty quickly. This is the actual document that was released today by this House subcommittee. It is a total of 42 pages long. 118th Congress, dated December 23, 2024, of course, which is today's date. And it's got everything spelled out and who Matt Gaetz was. The good stuff starts right here on page 7. All right, the committee has typically not released its findings after losing jurisdiction in a matter. However, there are a few prior instances here where the committee has determined that it was not in the public interest to release its findings, it was in the public interest to release it even after a member's resignation from Congress. The committee does not do so lightly because they know now that they are releasing this on Matt Gaetz, who has already left Congress. They realize now that a very clear and modern precedent has been set, and they know that if they find themselves in a similar situation, people will be screaming for their report to be released. And unfortunately, that's what they've done in this particular case. But anyway, here is a summary, black and white, ladies and gentlemen, of exactly what they found. And I want to apologize too if it looks like I'm looking off to the other side of the screen. Normally, I'm on your right-hand side of the screen because my friend Mark's with me today, which I'm glad to have him here. It's going to look a little different if I look off this way because it looks like I'm lost, but I'm actually looking at the document. So accept my apologies. I'll try to correct that for next time when we have a guest on the show. In summary, the committee found substantial evidence regarding the following. From at least 2017 to 2020, Representative Gaetz regularly paid women for engaging in sexual activity with him. Well, I can just... well, I don't want to comment about myself. Never mind. Let's move on. I can see Mark laughing through the camera. In 2017, Representative Gaetz engaged in sexual activity with a 17-year-old girl. During the period of 2017 to 2019, Representative Gaetz used or possessed illegal drugs, including cocaine and ecstasy, on multiple occasions. Representative Gaetz accepted gifts, including transportation and lodging in connection with a 2018 trip to the Bahamas in excess of the permissible amounts. 2018, Representative Gaetz arranged for his chief of staff to assist a woman with whom he engaged in sexual activity in obtaining a passport, falsely indicating to the U.S. Department of State that she was a constituent. Representative Gaetz knowingly and willfully sought to impede and obstruct the committee's investigation of his conduct. And then finally, Representative Gaetz has acted in a manner that reflects discreditably on the House. And I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, just clearly here, even though I make jokes about this, I'm pretty upfront with you. You know, I'm a Christian. I believe in Christ, but I'm not a perfect person, never have been a perfect person. And I hope I don't ever come across that somehow I'm holier than anything, because I'm not. My point is that there's a lot of men that could be found guilty of these exact same charges, or these, I should say, allegations that they have alleged against Matt Gaetz. Now, I've never seen cocaine in my life. I admit that. But in my mind, a drug is a drug is a drug. And I think that's where I'm going. I'm just very uncomfortable with this whole thing. It's just nasty. It's just nasty. It's just wrong. And as I've said before, I'm definitely no Matt Gaetz groupie by any stretch of imagination. But to me, this just looks bad and just seems wrong. And we'll pause and ask my friend Mark if he has any comment on this.
Yeah. You know, Gaetz' whole problem is that in Florida, prostitution is a crime even for the man. They don't just arrest the female, they arrest the John too.
Do you agree with my comments about this whole thing being icky?
Yeah, it's icky.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me because, sometimes when it's just me talking and I don't have that feedback, it's sometimes feels a little uncomfortable. But, again, I'm on my channel, like it or not, I just try to be as straightforward and honest about it as I possibly can and just call it the way I see it. If somebody wants to change my mind about something, I'm happy to have that discussion because, as I've said many times, I'm happy to talk about things that, frankly, I might be wrong on. I mean, it just really boils down to that. So the rest of that report, just to be clear, I've read just about the whole thing. It pretty well just dissects every little charge that we just went over right there. And it talks about their evidence and testimony that they've heard from. And if anybody's interested in me actually going through that whole document and a subsequent live stream, I'm happy to do that. Just either text it to me at the number below your screen here, or you can go ahead and type it in the comment or whatever, however you want to reach out and communicate with me, feel free to do so, as I'm happy to do just that if you want me to take a deeper dive on that. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears. I got a few other quick stories I want to get to that I think is important for us to talk about. First of all, I didn't necessarily have a particular video I wanted to share on this because I think it's, I actually have one in the actual feed that we're going to go over, and I'm curious what Mark's opinion on this. But we had President Joe Biden issue some, let's just say, some extensive pardons on everybody that is on death row right now in the federal system. I guess I should qualify that. Specifically, he left, I think it was 3 different individuals off. And here's the video on this. So let's go ahead and listen to this real quick, and then we will get comment from Mark on this. And we'll talk about it here in just 1 second.
Hi, John. Good to be with you. Another person on that list was convicted for killing 12 people in Philadelphia. That included 4 children. Now, President Biden says that he condemns these murderers and grieves for the victims' families, but added this in his statement, quote, "In good conscience, I cannot stand back and let a new administration resume executions that I halted." Now, Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, she responded in part saying, "Instead of death row, these monsters will rot in jail for life at taxpayer expense. More coal for crime victims on his way out." Now, exempt from these downgraded sentences were those who committed acts of terrorism or mass murders fueled by hate. That is Boston Marathon bomber Zohar Tsarnaev, Charleston church shooter Dylan Roof, and Pittsburgh synagogue shooter Robert Bauer. So those are exempt from the list. But the names included in the president's first round of mass clemency, remember that 1,500 more than so, prompted several Democrats even to sound off.
I have no doubt there were some righteous pardons in this group. Okay, let's say that. I believe that there were, but there were a number that I think make no sense at all.
So there was bipartisan pushback on that. For example, Kids for Cash scandal judge Michael Conahan, who was convicted of receiving kickbacks for sending children to for-profit detention centers. One mother whose son died by suicide after being locked up for months for being at an underage drinking party told Fox that she was.
I was very uncomfortable with this whole situation. That particular individual, y'all remember that, I think it was called Cash for Kids. It was probably 15, 17 years ago, something like that. And he was let out of jail. I believe he received a full pardon. But today you had the president that went ahead and effectively let all these people. Now these people are not free. I want to be clear. He commuted their sentences. In other words, they cannot be put to death, but they will spend the rest of their natural life in prison. And I have a few things I want to say about that. But Mark, do you have any particular comments on that you want to share with us?
Yeah, the 3 that he left off of the list were 3 that his Justice Department issued the death penalty for. So if they weren't given the death penalty by his Justice Department, then they got commuted to life. Otherwise, that's just icky.
I got you. I agree with that. The only other thing I want to make a comment about that I personally that I take exception with, so I think is the best way to say it, that I have an issue with, is the fact that the three that were left off, I believe one of them was the Boston bomber. We all remember him. Another person left off was the guy that shot up, I believe it was the guy that shot up the black church in Virginia or South Carolina. And then there was one that shot up some type of store. But anyway, these people definitely engaged in terrorism. I just want to point this out. The problem that I have is let's take the Boston bomber. And I don't have any sympathy for him. I'm just pointing something out for everybody to consider. And there he is right there on the left-hand side of your screen right there, that kid on the far left right there. He was not granted any type of commutation of his sentence. You have to understand, even though he was a bomber and he's responsible for a lot of people dying and being injured, there is something called undue influence under the law. And this guy was very young when this happened. I mean, he's a young man still. He had what we call undue influence from his older brother. Now, his older brother was killed during this particular situation. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it's very uncomfortable for me that this kid has, I think he was convicted at age 15 or something like that. And he's on death row. It just, again, this is something that I personally am just like, why? Why would you let all these other people have these commutations and you don't let this kid that reasonably has an excuse of some type of undue influence, i.e. his older brother, and yet he is still on death row and eligible to be put to death? And again, I believe he was convicted at age 15. I'd have to double check on that, but he's very young and was very young when this happened. Mark, any comment on that?
Yeah, he was like 15 or 16. And even though he was influenced by his older brother, he had chances he could have walked away. And he didn't walk away.
I totally get that. And I agree with you. But what I will say is just at that age, at 15, 16 years of age, when you have basically someone that's like a father, an older brother, somebody you look up to, I could just see how somebody that young could have someone influence him in such a way to where he could really be led down a path of poor choices. Again, I'm not saying he should get out of prison. I'm not saying he should be free. I'm just very uncomfortable about the death penalty. I've been very clear about that on this channel. That's why I don't describe myself as a complete hardcore conservative. I'm very iffy on the death penalty simply because it's an imperfect punishment and it's a permanent punishment, and the system is not perfect. The system has a lot of problems with it, and there's no doubt in my mind that the United States of America has executed innocent individuals. I firmly believe this. I've studied cases along this particular line, and that's the reason why I'm very uncomfortable when you have the United States of America putting anybody to death. Remember, when they first passed these laws for death, the argument was there were some individuals who were so evil, so bad, and their crime is so heinous that the only thing that we can do that's just is to extinguish their life form from the face of the earth. And unfortunately, we went from that to where the kid that shoots the clerk at the 7-Eleven is on death row. And again, I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished. I'm not saying they should be put in jail. I have problems with this death penalty. What say you?
I normally don't have a problem with the death penalty if it's like what I would call the worst of the worst. And by that, I mean, if you take several people's lives and show no remorse, then while some say, well, it's not a deterrent, well, in a way it is, because that person will never unalive someone again.
I got you. And listen, I understand it's a complicated issue, a lot of complicated things there. But Mark, I want to thank you for being with us today. I want to start winding it down right now. Because we have feedback on your issue, I'm going to remind everybody that you have your own channel at Sapphire Ridge News, which is simply at Sapphire Ridge News. Mark generally goes live most days around 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, I want to thank you, Mark, for being here, and I appreciate your comment and participating in our discussion today. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate each and every one of you. You know, we all have Christmas Eve tomorrow, Christmas Day coming up, and this is a great time to obviously reflect on all the blessings we have in our life. I was watching earlier today, I think it was on Fox News 11 something, the 11 o'clock hour, at least here on the East Coast, and it's just kind of surprising to me. One of the hosts, they were saying something to the effect of, we lose the meaning of the season. And her comment was, yeah, we lose the meaning of the season. We forget what the season's about. And what this particular reporter said is, we forget that it's all about family. It's all about being together. It's all about the food or something like that. And she never mentioned Christ one time. And that just like shocked me. I felt like I was almost in a twilight zone of sorts. Don't forget the reason for the season, no matter what your situation is. You know, I mean, listen, life is life. Nothing's ever perfect. And if you're feeling blue, if you're feeling a little tough, understand, focus back on the reason for the season, which of course is Jesus Christ, the birth of Jesus Christ, the great hope for all of humanity. I personally don't know how I would get through each and every day without having that hope in my heart. That hope is what allows us all to move on to another day, to know that all the pain, all the problems are worth it. And it's just really amazing when you think about it in that context. So always be grateful for all the blessings you have. Bible says, count your blessings, count your many blessings, count them one by one. I think when you have an attitude of gratitude, when you have an understanding that you're only here for a short time and you need to be grateful for each and every blessing that you have, I think that's the way to appreciate the season, to be happy and to move forward in a positive frame of mind. I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said people are about as happy as they choose to be. And I think that's the key. And oftentimes in life, we get bogged down with the day-to-day problems, the day-to-day aggravations that we deal with. But you know what? You can control one thing. And what you can control is your attitude and how you look at something. If you have something that's aggravating you or causing you to be down or causing you to be blue, I don't deny it's a problem. But you can change how you perceive it. You can simply say, instead of it being a problem, it's a good thing because of blank. And you just reframe it. Trust me on this. Reframe it. Appreciate the gifts that each and every one of us have. Appreciate the fact we're in a season celebrating the birth and our Lord Jesus Christ. And I think that hopefully will bring hope, peace, and joy into each one of your lives. That's why I do this. That's why I do this channel, is because I simply want each and every one of us to have a better life. It's really just that simple. May this particular Christmas season, that the Holy Spirit, that the Lord has the Holy Spirit bless each and every one of you and your families, of course. And thank you so much for joining me. I don't take it for granted. I sincerely appreciate you tuning in to hear what I have to say. It's definitely something I don't take for granted. Guarantee you that. Always say, my friends, keep that mind free. Never give up. Until next time, I am J.R. Duke.